What's happened to them all? They've all gone to developers. Well, why can't this one, be given back to the people, for the people, so that people can invest? It's this investment back into the local community. Why do they all have to go to provide housing? And I know housing's important, but maybe what's happening in Boronia means that this can be preserved for the people. Not just for you, but for the people of Boronia and Furniture Gully and everything like that. So it can be a place where people can come to and enjoy the open space. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's for your children or your grandchildren and the local plants and animals. So let's try and make this a place that you can bring your grandchildren back to in the future and say, see this park? We did this. We made this park. The reason you can play here and you can see amnials and birds and all that sort of stuff is because we stood up and said, no, 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 it's not going to become just houses. We want something special. So what we need is political activism.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, well done. That's what we need. So politicians react to angry voters willing to speak out. If you are silent, you get development. If you speak out, you get something special. Something, again, like I say, can bring your grandchildren back to, point to it and say, we stuck it up the government. Yeah. All right? So, sorry, Heidi.
I'm in opposition, not in government. I just point that out.
So more people is allowed a voice. So if you say nothing, you'll get nothing. All right. So if we speak out, the Knox Environment Society, they'd say, yeah, well, they would say that because they say that all the time. If you speak out, they'll say, wow, look what these people are saying to us. So it needs everyone to speak out, everyone to put their hand up, everyone to write letters, everyone to...
Yeah, write letters.
Yeah, write letters, because letters mean so much. Because it's obviously someone has got off their cushion and actually done something. What we're hoping for today is to perhaps form a little group, a Boronia Heights Secondary College Action Group or something, who are willing to take on that role of political activism. The KES is happy to support you. All right, so we'll give you help, guidance. We'll have maybe a couple of us on the group as well. We're happy to provide funding. We raise money through our nursery. You guys who bought plants, you're the ones who are funding this. Thank you very much. So we're happy to provide support in terms of financial as well to keep the campaign rolling. We need perhaps 5 or 6 local heroes to stand up, to make sure that the political activism, to keep everyone informed, to go around and door knock, to get people to sign petitions, to lobby their local politicians and councillors and so on. All right, so if there are such people, we as a group will keep campaigning for the areas we're interested in and we'll fight damned hard. But if we can have another group, that's another voice, another different lot of people who are saying, no, don't do it. Okay, so have a think about it. Up here on the table there are some leaflets, there's a petition, there's a thing to put your contact details on. Right, so if you're interested in joining a little group, perhaps come and see me and we can have a chat. Okay? Heidi, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Richard, and thank you all so much for coming out this morning. For those who I haven't met before, the reason I stood for Parliament 11 years ago was because the government at the time was axing some education programs. And I felt really strongly that certain things should not be tampered with, including our kids' education. I also believe in a time where we're getting 100,000 new people into Victoria every year. Okay, they're not going north anymore, they are actually coming to us. Great. But it means that we do have to find housing. We know medium density housing around activity centres, so around shops, around schools, around transport is the way it has to be. But this is not necessarily that spot. There isn't a station next door. It is a little way away, so it doesn't need to be really high density here. Okay? Realistically, I mean, when we first came down here, there were still buildings. And I think we all shed a tear the day we saw how much vandalism had happened. The buildings were burnt out, the copper wire had been, stripped, and it was tragic. They were fantastic solid buildings that could have beautifully made a nursing home or a rehab facility. There were ramps in place, there was the whole lot, and that was my vision for it. But unfortunately, the government let the vandals come in, they didn't secure the property, and it got to the stage where they had to raise it. I brought it up in Parliament lots of times, told the minister, who used to be the member for this area until the boundaries were redrawn, and I said, over years you visited this school, it's been good to you, now be good back. And it fell on deaf ears. Next thing I knew, this was all being cleared. Richard's dead right about the process. It needs to be, it needs to go to all of the other government departments. So, for example, it might go to parks or sport and rec, or, you know, again, the education department, had they wanted it, they would have kept the buildings and repatriated them. But it looks as though the government don't want it. No division of the government. It now gets brought along to the next layer of government, and I see John is here, right here. Hello, John. Lovely John Mortimore, who you all know. He's adorable and he's fabulous for this area. So it's now going to be offered, if it hasn't already, been offered to Knox Council to see if they want to do it. Now, we all pay rates in Knox. I live in Bayswater, so I'm not far away either. Realistically, you know what this land is worth. Are Knox Council going to buy this and turn it into a park? Let's be realistic and say that's probably not the likely outcome. Okay? But if it is going to be subdivided, if we have to lose any part of this, if Knox Council don't want to buy it, we need to preserve the bits that are really significant. So obviously, you know, the treed area down there, the really significant area up there, anywhere that's got significant flora or fauna on it, needs to be preserved. I'm going to put it out there. Are there any developers in the crowd today?
Like to be. It wouldn't be game to tell you.
Well, okay. If I was in amongst you know, a very friendly group like this, I still may not even put up my hand and say yes, I'm a developer, which I'm not. But can I just encourage you, if you are here, to have a look around you. These will be the people that will either work with you or against you. You have options. The options are, of course, do something that's very sensitive to the area, something that will be good for future generations. Don't touch the significant areas. There is a certain percentage that has to come back to the community as open space anyway. Think very carefully, but work with the Knox Environment Society to find out where those bits are. Don't just go in, don't just bulldoze. Actually consult. And that's something, unfortunately, that the government has not been doing. And you're right, planning decisions are being overturned. And it is tragic what's going on in some areas. Don't make that same mistake. If you're a developer and you're listening, please consult. Let's do this in a friendly manner. Let's work out how it is best for our community. Richard has put together a very good petition. And there's two sheets you need to sign. One has contact details. So in other words, how can he get back to you to get you up to date about when the petition is tabled and that sort of thing. I'm going to reformat that, so that's fine, sign today, but we are going to ask, if you put your name on that contact sheet, I'm going to send you out petitions in the new format, so it's actually a bit bigger for people like me who need glasses. So it's easier to sign, but it will also have things in it like email addresses, so we can get back to people and keep in contact with them and say this is where the process is at. So if you pop your name on that list, you'll get some petitions in the mail from me. Okay, so you can take them round to your neighbours, to your friends, as long as they're over 18 and live in Victoria and they're on the electoral roll, their name will count on the petition to the Parliament. Time frame wise, we can either rush this through by the end of June, then there is the winter recess. Some go away, some of us stay in the office and do catch up. We're then back in Parliament first or second week of August. So I'd like this to be presented in August. That gives you the next month and a half to go out and get as many thousands of signatures as you possibly can. They do listen. Sometimes they listen more than others, but the more numbers, the more they're inclined to listen. So can I thank you all so much for coming down and giving your support to Richard and the group this morning, but also ask you to be actively involved from here forward. Today is only the start. It's not where your involvement finishes. So if you'd like some petitions, please make sure we get all of your contact details, and I'll get those out to you.
Excuse me, Heidi.
Yes.
We've had some inkling that the state government might fast track this. What is the fast track process? Do you know that there will be only a very small window of opportunity for people to submit their petitions and so on when it happens? That it's a very short amount of time between when they put up a proposal in that situation to when you can actually have a chance. So you've got to be really ready to go. So August might not be doable if that occurs right. Do you understand what that process is?
Okay, so the question was about how the planning process can be fast-tracked. Having worked, I was a photographer before I came to Parliament, okay, so believe me, the bureaucracy was new to me. Fast-track is never as fast as we think it is. Okay. Normal process is 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. You know, and we go, just like things to move a little bit faster. On this one, of course, we don't want to. I cannot see anything happening in the next month or two. Happy to be, well, not happy to be proven wrong, but if I'm wrong, I'm happy to say I didn't know, but it is very unlikely, unless, do you know anything more? John, come on in and help us out here, because you might know something about the process in between.
Yeah, look, as far as fast tracking goes through the normal process, as Heidi said, that would be taking it from like a 2-year process to, you know, maybe a 9-10 month process. Council's got a position on this property. If the government was to sell this to a developer under the what we've already agreed to, that could be fast tracked through in a matter of probably weeks, because the council side of the planning's already been done. I'll explain what that is in a moment. So I can tell you point blank, the council's not going to buy this land unless one of you can come up with a few $1 million to donate to council for that purpose. Well, they're talking about at least 25 housing lots on here, so you add 25 times what houses normally worth, so it's probably about 15 million.
We'll pass the hat around in a minute.
Pass the hat around. You might get it a bargain price of 12 million, I don't know.
25. No, 25 housing. Yeah. Is that all?
That's all it was in the council's proposal. So it's not.
It can be overruled.
I can, and I'll give an example of that. Some of you, I'm sure, were involved in the activism down in the Boronia Activity Centre, this side of Dawson Road, not the other side, so my territory, because when I came into council all those years ago, the plan was that we would have 11 to 14 metres as the height in the building in the residential area. We fought against that, and we got that reduced down to 7.5 metres. Guess what it is now? It's 11. You know, and places that we've actually, the plans that we've actually approved for quite attractive 2-storey developments down there have now been shelved by the developers, and they're putting applications in for 3-storey in those same spots. And you know, so yeah, we can easily get overruled. Look, I'll just go through briefly.
How do you stop getting overruled?
You don't. You've got to persuade the government. They're the ultimate authority.
And the minister.
Well, having the minister on board is pretty critical, but you've got to get the government itself has to agree to it, because they're the ultimate authority. They can overrule anything the council does, but we sometimes persuade them that they're wrong and we're right, and that the original Boronia one was an example of that, because it even went to the panel, and the panel said 11 metres is fine. We said no, it's not. We argued the case, and it got reduced. However, you know, those are different things. Look, council's plan on this basically is that we retain all of the bushland, the remnant bushland that is here in perpetuity. We retain the oval initially for passive recreation, but we have an extreme shortage of sports ovals within Knox, and it's mainly because of the women. who are now running out there and playing all those sports that we used to be just for men. Which we think's a great thing, but you know, it means that we don't have enough grounds, and we've got to spend a fortune on some of the grounds we've got so they can sustain the level of work they are. I would love to see this as a park. I mean, absolutely fantastic. We could turn this whole thing into a park, and I'll fight for that. But I'll be honest with you, I don't see a lot in terms of prospects there. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen. And in terms of getting numbers and petitioning and so forth, yes, that's important. But you need a lot of numbers. And this is not a lot of numbers, I have to tell you. And for something like that, this is great to tell people that the community cares. But in terms of putting enough pressure on the government to actually overturn their policies, you're going to have to get into the thousands in terms of your numbers, preferably tens of thousands, and preferably from people who live in this area, not from people from Toowoomba and London. Because believe me, people do go through and they actually check the petition to see where the people come from. And they take a lot more notice of people who are affected than by people who just think this is another good cause. And I mean, it is a good cause. This is a great spot here. There have been a lot of fears about it. There's talk about social housing. We actually have social houses scattered right through this area. Most people aren't aware of which houses are social housing. That's the way it should be. And if it happened here, and the last that I heard is that it is likely that there will be some here, but it won't be. This won't be a social housing estate. The likelihood is that there would be on the last thing that came to us, slightly elevated above rumour level of the government's plans, would be that this would be one of a number of sites that would be used to create some 20-odd social housing things, which would probably mean between 6 and 8 in here in the mix. I'll get back and I'll find out exactly what the numbers are. But council's plan is that this would become a residential lot under the same rules as the foothills policy. Now, this is in this area here. I'm pretty sure we're 1,000 square metres. Who lives here? 1,000? Yeah, because of the slope and the ridge line. So we'd be looking at a minimum 1,000 square metres per home. All the other guidelines that we have in place to make sure that it's decent quality housing. It's not suitable for some of the other purposes that people have in mind because it's the nearest public transport is just the bus up the road. So public transport is poor, and it's about as far as you can get from the shopping centres. It's roughly halfway between the two of them, so that's a poor location. We do need more housing. Personally, my personal view is that Melbourne should have the no vacancy sign up by now. It should have had it up years ago. For that, we need governments who can embrace decentralisation and actually do something about it, not sit back and think, well, private enterprise should do it, because private enterprise won't. They never have. We're the only country in the world that I'm aware of that has found decentralisation to be too difficult. And never, ever in the history of this country, the history of the world, has it been easier for people to decentralise. You know, people can have jobs here in Melbourne, and they can live up in Merbein, and they can do the work from there. As most of you know, I edit the local community papers, and I desktop published 2 of them. The one time my wife and I went on an overseas holiday, I did one of them from Paris, and I did another one from Amsterdam. Now, that's producing a local paper. It's being printed in Shepparton, being done here. You know, people are not tied down to the location the way they used to be. So why aren't we getting people moving up country? The only thing keeping half our small country towns alive are actually refugees and migrants who are willing to put in the hours that are needed to run those sort of little local things like milk bars and so forth to keep the community alive. So that's enough of that rant. Look, we need governments to embrace decentralisation and put some of this increase. They're planning on Melbourne to have a population of 8 million. 8 million. Now, any of you driven on the roads recently? No? You probably understand why I ride a bicycle. It's much better.
But when they say, you know, the units that are being built in the city, they're not even occupied a lot of them. So you know,
they build them as investment, not in terms of need, and in terms of long term. People buy those properties, just like you'll see some shops down here, even in Boronia. They're owned by people overseas. They don't care if there's anybody in them. They don't care if they make the neighbourhood look bad because they're vacant. They've got other personal and political motives in mind, and people buy them as an investment.
John, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So with you're talking about the 1,000 square metres. So you're saying 25 house lots is how it could be divided?
Yep, I'm pretty sure it's 25, but I'll have to actually go and check that.
But can there be multiple dwellings on a lot?
No, that's 1,000 square metres per dwelling. The dwelling with a maximum 40% site coverage of the building, and I think it's a minimum of 40% of pervious surface. That's like gardens and
But we have, excuse me, John.
Is that a definite number, 25?
no, look, I'll have to get back and send an email around when you people have done your thing, because I need to get back and check the plans.
Because to me, 25, I think that could be done sympathetically and make huge improvements.
Oh, look, the plan that we put together is actually, I think, quite a good one in terms of if this is going to be residential. It means that this area that's all sort of open and desolate here would become nice housing. The oval would still be there in public use. The bushland's still protected. I mean, I think we've got a fairly good plan if it goes down that way.
Yeah, John, you're saying that.
Yep.
That's what councils do.
Yeah, that's council's
Supposing council don't get a choice.
Yeah, I don't want people to be
Supposing it's
confused.
sold to developers by the state government, which they did down in the old Furniture Gully Primary School. They made an absolute joke of that joint.
That wasn't sold to developers, and the people who live there would disagree with you on that, but that
maybe
wasn't
they would,
developers.
John, but it was rushed through by Simon Madden,
Yes.
and he rushed it through. So the fast track is a matter of minutes, not bloody weeks or
Yeah,
years.
but the council stepped in on that one there, and we made a big difference to it. The reason that didn't just turn into a ghetto was because of council's intervention to make sure that there was a sympathetic mix of people in there. I mean, people in social housing get a bit of a bad name because there are some people who are basically, let's face it, waste of space, who live in social housing. But that's only some. There are also people who waste of space that live in their own private housing. There are people who live in really nice houses and let them fall apart around them, and you all know people like that. But it also means you've got things like your single mums, your widows, your people who are unemployed, and not because they're lazy, but because they can't get a decent job. You've got people who are ill, you've got people who are disabled. These are the people that you have to find housing for, and they have the biggest problem getting the housing because they're not out there earning the big bucks. So, a mix of that in it would be fine. That's what they did down there, but they turned the whole site into social housing.
Yeah.
They could do the same thing here, but what we've been told so far is that is not their plan, and there's certainly something I'd fight against.
Don't, John. We're finding out about that now. We should have been informed about this right along. Council should have kept us informed as soon as this bloody school was knocked down.
Well, until the government made the decision, or until actually the Education Department, or whatever name they're currently known, decided that it was surplus to their requirements, then all we can do is speculate. So, because we've had no idea of what's actually going to be here. That's why, and we did quite a lot of consultation when we put together our plan. And it is one that I don't think that anybody could seriously object to, other than the fact that it's not a complete park. So if we looked at the ideal outcome would be if we did turn this into a great municipal park. But who's going to pay? And that's it would be really serious money.
But I think as locals, we need to put in an ambient claim. And an ambient claim is that this is parkland. And then we work back from there. But if we all say that, and I know John doesn't think we've got enough numbers, but if we're all strong and we're all at least put in an ambient claim, that's the starting point. Starting point is it's all parkland. And then we can work back from there. If you just give up and say, oh, we'll have housing, and people say, oh, trust us at council, we've got this plan, this is our plan, and state government says, trust us, we'll look after you. I'm just saying to you, just be careful.
Okay. And I'll say the same thing, be careful, but for a different reason, and I rarely disagree with Richard. Yeah, I do, but no, we're on the same page with most things that we discuss. Look, my concern would be that if the government sees the claim as being unreasonable, then they will simply disregard what people want to a greater degree. However, that still doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a strong push for a park. I think that there should be, and I think it should be that this is what everybody wants. But have the fallback position that if we don't have that, we get at the minimum.
We're always doing an ambient claim. That's why you put it in to begin with, because then it gives you a fallback position.
I'm doing some mental arithmetic. I don't know whether there's any accountants here, and I'm certainly not one. But if we're talking 25 house lots, if going on the size here, and we're saying that it's worth, say, 12 to 15 million. Let's go 12 and a half, because I think that's half of 25, right? So a house block being $500,000 to buy, then constructing the home on top of it, you're talking $700,000 to $800,000, and at that stage the developer has not made any profit. And if there is social housing, obviously that's going to be sold off cheaper. I don't know how 25 can work.
How big is the block?
Look, don't get hung up on the 25 because that's.
We should know that.
I'll get that figure for you on I've tried to get hold of the plan this week that we've got, but I couldn't get it in time for the meeting. But I will get it, and we'll email it around to people who can get on the email list.
Can we just clarify, John, that is council's preferred plan, which could be overruled by the state government, who sees this site in a different way. And I will say this about council, that they did a lot of work putting the overlays on many years ago in an effort to predict, to tell people, inform the government levels that that's what they saw as important about this block. But when it comes to any objections, I understand that council's voice in the process should only be one voice. Then each of us can be one voice as well. Each individual can have as much weight as council in that sense when it comes up to submitting and making objections to any proposal. So even though that's council's preferred position, I understand in this fast-tracking state policy, the way they do it, that it doesn't carry any more weight, and we're encouraged to speak up if we think differently.
John, just quickly, has council considered developing this land themselves, becoming a developer? I mean, let's not look at the short term. It's going to cost $25 million. I mean, it's going to cost $25 million, but you can get a bit of return.
Look, we've looked at being developers on two other occasions. One of them was Stamford Park, which is currently being developed by developers, but along guidelines that we set. And we've got a suitable amount of money back from it. In fact, the whole Stamford Park development down there, the wetlands, the parklands, all the international stuff, is actually being paid for by those developers who bought those lots. My position at the time when that was happening is that council should have actually been the developer, not given it to others, because we'd have made about $6 million extra out of it. The argument that was put forward, coming from the officers and accepted by the majority of councillors then, was that council's not a developer. And I think, well, that's okay. We control what developers do. Why can't we do the same thing? We also looked at it in terms of the Department of
Industry and horticultural development.
yeah, in industry and horticultural development. They all their names keep wandering around for me. But in terms of that site there, but in the end, it became too difficult. And also the government wouldn't give us it at the price we wanted, which didn't help.
I think there are opportunities there to maybe get into a joint venture with some of the developers, because bigger ones, they're copying.
We've done joint development on a small scale sort of thing, so it might be, for example, somebody setting up a small scale development for some particular specific social housing need, and then council might get into that as a joint venture. And that's usually done when council actually owns the property, and we'll do things like we'll discount the price of the property as our contribution in order to see that happen. But straight outright developers, no, I'd love to see council doing it. Councils across the world used to do it as a regular thing. They didn't always do it well, but I think learning the lessons from the past, I think we could do it well. In Western Australia, they've got government departments that do housing much better than we do it here. There's great models around as to how it could work. The Defence Housing Association, for example, they do great stuff and run at a profit. I mean, a government department that runs at a profit and produces the outcome that they aim at. I know, unbelievable, isn't it? Obviously, they don't have enough bureaucrats, so they employ a few more. But look, we're kind of early days in that all we know is that this is going to happen, and it's going to happen in the near future. How near that future is, we don't know. And I think it's fantastic to get, I mean, I was surprised, McHenry. I thought there'd be half a dozen people here and everyone else trickling in when I got here. And I'm sorry for being late, but I didn't set the alarm. I thought I'd have woken up hours earlier. But I didn't, and I was allowed to sleep. There's got to be a good outcome here. There's got to be a good outcome, and we need to have our hierarchy of what we will accept. Now, one thing that I do know is that neither Liberal nor Labor, and I generally don't talk about Liberal governments and Labor governments, as anybody who ever reads the stuff that I put in, I talk about Victorian governments and Australian governments and so forth, because there is no Liberal government, there is no Labor government, there's a Victorian government we have to deal with. Now, they will vary, and I'm sorry, Heidi, but you know what I mean? Heidi's as much a part of the government as James Molino. He just happens to be in what they call the government.
No, I'm as much a part of the Parliament, but not the government. I have to clarify that. And it is very different because I am not in a decision-making position.
Except you get a vote.
I do get a
Come on,
vote.
guys, let's round it
I
up.
do get a vote, but it's very different.
It's morning tea time.
And there is a community planting down at the Yarrabing wetlands too that I'm also supposed to be at right
There were a
now.
couple of questions too, Richard.
So,
A couple of points.
Yep.
We're a local just up here in Sapphire.
Yes.
Recently we had a letter dropped in our letterbox with our names on it.
Oh, yeah.
Bygone Property Group.
yep.
Your property has been identified for development.
There.
So there's one concern.
I'll deal with them first. They've identified every house in my ward, and I presume the neighbouring ones as well. I've had complaints from people living down off Dorset Road down near Ferntree Gully. You know, what's this letter I've just got?
Oh, yeah.
I've had people up the mountain. No, absolutely not. And I can tell you that both sides of Parliament believe in protecting the foothills policy.
Yep. Next question.
The next one is a strategy from this point on. Let's get the incumbent minister here to answer questions and be transparent.
Happy to answer.
Good luck. Media and all this other garbage that we're used to seeing in through Parliament, through the media at times. So let's get him up front, face the people, and actually answer questions, serious questions on what their intent is and how they want to go about it.
So can I ask which minister you're thinking? Well, no, but it depends on, because it can't, not necessarily planning, it depends on whether it gets sold off, whether, obviously John says council are probably not going to buy it. Obviously state government have said that they don't want to. So it may well be the planning minister, but he can only act on the plans that come before him. So you actually need to get it, you actually need to see what a developer who buys the property wants to do with it and then get the minister in. It's an awful way to do it, but he can only say, well, I'd prefer it if there were only 25 houses here, but if a developer puts in a plan for 100 homes, I'm being silly, but say they put in for 100 homes, then it's up to the minister to decide whether or not that will go through.
But doesn't the minister at that time already have, and this is I suppose where he needs to be educated on this area, of its maximum capacity?
Yep, and
Well,
look, council have developed obviously the foothills policy. What are we up to? 2025 policy, and that's all the different overlays as to how they want density to happen in certain areas. So it leaves certain suburban streets from medium to higher density, so that around the activity districts we can actually have that higher density. So it's been quite deliberate. If you live near transport and shops and things like that, it will be higher density because some people who don't drive, that's convenient for them. But if you live in a suburban street, you're less likely to get development. So that's been a very deliberate strategy by council, and I think they've done it quite well.